What's up, guys? Coach Gaglione is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione, and I've been involved with powerlifting and strength coaching for over 14 years. Today we have an interview-style podcast. My goal over the next several episodes or so, maybe it won't be exactly in order, to kind of interview some of our athletes that have competed at the recent XPC Finals at the Arnold in March 2020. It was one of the last meets that we were able to do with what's going on right now. And that's not going to be the topic today. We're just going to focus on the good. We're going to focus on the results. So we have Melissa on the line today, Exploding Llama. What's going on?
Hey, what's up?
All right. So for people, so Melissa's been on the podcast before. She's been a long-time member. But for people that it's their first time listening, can you just give us a little bit of background of who you are and what you got going on right now?
Yeah, so I've been on the team for, I'm going to say 3 years. I'd have to check on social media because my concept of time is off normally. It's even worse now. But about 3 years. Came here from CrossFit. My CrossFit gym had actually closed. And at that point, I was like, do I want to continue with CrossFit or do I want to specialize with, the thing that I'm good at in CrossFit, which is the barbell lifting is really 2% of it if you've ever done CrossFit before. And then it turns out this gym was 5 minutes from my house and started and I've been here ever since.
Awesome. So I want to kind of rewind a little bit, and then we'll kind of talk about your progression in the sport because I think it's good. Yeah, and it's been about 3 years. Got your open powerlifting file up here, just for reference. I think it's cool to see your progression. So can you tell us a little about your athletic background, maybe how you got into fitness, what was your relationship with fitness like, and then just how you got into CrossFit, and then maybe what made you decide that you wanted to transition in powerlifting. So you can take as long as you like, no rush, but I think it's important to kind of give some people background of kind of how you got started.
Yeah, so I was always the fat kid growing up, always until, I'm going to say I was the fat kid until 14. Yeah, about 14. And then I can't really tell you what clicked, but I just decided, you know what, I'm tired of being the fat kid. And that turned into, let me try. At that point, I didn't know anything about fitness. So it was, let me try this diet. Let me try that diet. It was every fad diet, everything that was promising to make me drop 5 pounds in a week, I was doing it. Then it got to a point where I kind of learned what a calorie was. And I started to drop the weight.
So I'm going to probably pause you a couple of times, I think. So number one, I thought you just made a decision. So I think that's really important if you're struggling with losing weight or just getting started with anything. I think it's important just to make the decision. You're going to just start. That a lot of times breaking inertia is really hard. So that's great. So when you said learned what a calorie, what were you researching? Were you Googling things online?
Google, yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with just researching initially. All right, so just keep going. So
yeah,
you started learning.
Was Google. I had no background in any kind of fitness. Everyone in my family was overweight. So, I was kind of just starting from scratch and working uphill because everything my mom made, I was big for a reason. That was the environment I was in. Started going to Planet Fitness. That was, so I'll make Planet Fitness jokes, but I also can't, rag on it too much because it is, when you're starting out, it is less intimidating. When you don't know if this is something you're going to stick to, you don't want to invest a ton of money into it. So I do think, it's not the best facility, but if you're starting out and you're intimidated and scared, I think it was a good place for me because there was a lot of other overweight people there too. So I felt okay in that environment. And at that point, I didn't know anything about resistance training. I just knew that burning calories made you lose weight. So that started to work. I started to get really into running. At my heaviest at that point, I was 160 and I got down to 120 with just running. I got to a point where I was super into the running. I'd go out and, I feel like running 13 miles today. And I'd go out and I'd do that. And I was, I have to dig up a photo and show it to everyone at some point because I don't think people have seen the super skinny, gross photos of me, but my ears were too big for my body. It was ridiculous. And that's not sustainable. So then I think junior year of high school, this all happened when I was a teenager, by the way. So junior year of high school, I spent 3 or 4 years real thin. And then junior year, I guess it just wasn't sustainable. And then the stress of, AP and exams and SATs and all that stuff, I rebounded hard. And this was conveniently when I was getting into CrossFit. So I was like, well, you know what? It's okay that I eat this because I'm lifting weights and now I'm doing the WOD. So I'm burning all these calories. So instead of doing the opposite, which was starving myself and running, now I thought I could out-train a bad diet. Ended up graduating, leaving high school at around 190-ish. and proceeded to be around that weight for several more years. So it was like a yo-yo, but I ended up even worse than when I started. And then that was, I came here pretty much that heavy. So when I first started powerlifting, that's not entirely true. When I first started powerlifting, my first meet, I weighed in at 185. And because it was USAPL with the kilos, I competed in the 84 kilogram weight class because the upper limit's 185. Then ended up doing RPS, and at that point just kept dropping, and now I'm in the 155-ish range.
Cool. So we're going to pause because there's a lot of stuff in between there, so I think that's a good place. So I want to kind of recap a couple of things. So environment's really key. I come from an Italian household, so I understand it's like you're taught like clean your plate, finish what you eat. Do you have big meals? It's a big social thing, so that could be a factor. Sometimes it's not necessarily our fault, but it's just how we're brought up, and we don't kind of know any better when you're younger. So you're kind of fighting an uphill battle sometimes, but it's just important to educate yourself and kind of be aware of these things. Another thing that I had a similar kind of issue as well. I went from 275 pounds as low as 185 pounds. Hey. 185 pounds. So with that, it was mostly, again, I was exercising a lot, and you kind of learn almost the wrong thing. You're in a calorie deficit, and you see success, and you think you can kind of eat whatever you want. So I was wrestling a lot. I was going to morning wrestling, and I had lost about close to 100 pounds. Going from 9th grade to 10th grade myself, and then I kind of slowly started to put the weight back on once you start to like have less activity. You start to kind of loosen up the chains a little bit on your diet. You don't really have the best relationship with food. So you start CrossFitting, your CrossFit gym closes down, you kind of start to see that maybe you have a little bit of an ability with the strength stuff. You saw some success early on, but what made you decide that you wanted to kind of jump in to your first powerlifting meet?
I guess because I had been talking about it for a while, and then I saw that there was one, and the first one I did ever was in Brooklyn, and I'm like, that's not that much of a hike. So I was like, let me sign up for that one. Which I did, and then I ended up signing up for it, and then realizing, wait, I did this backwards. I probably should have gone to the powerlifting gym first and then signed up for it. So I competed in February, but I joined here in January. So my first month here was basically just some put together peaking cycle to make sure that I kind of had an idea of what the hell I was going to do.
Somewhat prepared, yeah.
Yeah, which I think still put me ahead of 90% of the people that were there having their first meet. There were people attempting to PR in their first attempt. Like, people had no idea what they were doing. But, yeah, it was really just, do you want to keep kind of being good at some things and mediocre at everything else? Or do you want to get, really good at a couple things? And I've always been the kind of person that, I've never seen a whole lot of purpose in being a jack of all trades, especially there's just some stuff that genetically you're never going to get around. There's certain things I'm just not built for, and that's okay. But the lifting to me was always more fun. I didn't have to force myself to get up and lift. I had to force myself to get up and do cardio. So it just seemed like it was more enjoyable and something that, seemed more in line with just how my body was built.
A lot of good points there. I think going back to the Planet Fitness thing, I think a lot of people think, and we're in this day and age where, especially if you're a powerlifter listening to this, we get spoiled. You have the calibrated plates, the monolift. You have all the special equipment. You have access to all these coaching programs and all that. But there's nothing wrong with just getting started with a walk. There's nothing wrong with just getting started with getting off your couch and doing some push-ups. So set the bar low, especially if you're just starting, and just kind of get moving, especially if you're struggling, and just kind of get started and kind of decide that you want to make a change. So I think that's a big lesson learned there. So now you're getting into powerlifting. You had some success early on. You did well. You're doing well as a raw lifter. So then you slowly made the decision. Obviously, you've been at our gym, so you kind of start to get exposed to knee wraps and squat suits and things like that. So you start to transition to raw and start to kind of dabble in some raw with wraps, and then eventually now you're ranked very highly in equipped. So just to kind of fast forward a little bit, so your first meet, still successful. First meet was you totaled about just a little bit under 800 pounds to 793. That was back in 2017, and most recently, and that was in the 84 kilogram class, so 185, 181, and then most recently you just competed in the 148 class. You won the Arnold best lifter, and totaled 1,100 pounds equipped. So, what kind of made you decide that you wanted to kind of make the transition and try the different style of lifting?
I guess because it was just it was hard. And to have something, and it's not that raw lifting ever stops being hard. Like, none of it ever stops being hard. But when I first got into that bench shirt, I got into the metal jack shirt at one point when it was me, Lou, and Benny, and we stayed after the session, and they just put me in a bench shirt. And I remember getting into it, and it was like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. I want to keep doing this, because there was just something about it. Because the first time I ever had 2 plates in my hand, I was like, this is really painful and really uncomfortable, but this is also like really cool. And yeah, I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. And at that point, once I tried the bench shirt, I'm like, all right, well, if benching this much and having that kind of weight in your hands is that cool, I can't imagine what it's like to squat in equipment. But I just thought it was just something so different. And I think, honestly, the lack of popularity kind of drew me to it as well, because I was like, well, if people aren't doing it, why is that? And I think, honestly, because it's uncomfortable. It's hard.
Yep.
It's painful. I still have gashes on my leg from the Arnold, from where the briefs chopped me up. So I think there's something to be said that I think it does require, you kind of have to be a glutton for pain if you're doing stuff like that. And that's always been something that, if it's uncommon, I usually get drawn to stuff like that. So I guess it was just hard, and that's what made me like it.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with going against the grain. Even if like the multiply and equipped is not as popular, it doesn't mean it could be an outlet that could be beneficial for you. It might be something you really enjoy. So I just kind of invite people to try it. I always like to use the analogy as well, like kind of a race analogy, because a lot of people I do think it's an apples to oranges comparison. Both are fruits, but they're like not the same thing. And I think equipped lifting and raw lifting are 2 different animals. I like to kind of use the analogy of a race, that you could have a race on foot, you could have a race on a bike, you could have a race in a car, and multiply lifting is kind of like racing in a race car. You still need a skill, you still need coordination. There's technique involved. There's still an athletic component to it, but there's much more chance of death than running on foot, and the ramifications of errors are much greater. So I don't know if you want to comment on that, and maybe comment on some of the differences, and maybe if you have some advice for people that maybe are looking to try equipped lifting.
I mean, definitely to the almost dying part. Like, I've never almost been crushed under a barbell raw benching. And that did happen once with the shirt in my first, I think that was my first meet. I only went 1 for 3 because the last 2 attempts almost killed me. But yeah, it's something that I think, I'm not an adrenaline junkie in a lot of different ways. I don't like heights. I don't like roller coasters. I don't like driving fast. Like, I'm actually pretty boring in 90% of my life, so I guess maybe this is how I get my kicks, to put it bluntly. Like, that's my source of, like, living dangerously. I don't do anything else that's, like, wild, so this is as wild as it gets for me. But it's definitely, I think it's just a very different style of lifting. I think my first session in the briefs was kind of bizarre, because I kept trying to lift raw and it just doesn't work. But, even if you think you're competent in all the lifts, it's just a wildly different, lifting style. There is a learning curve. You can't think you're going to put a bench shirt on and add, 200 pounds to your bench. You're probably going to end up dumping it on your face if you try something like that. There's definitely a technique and a learning curve and different strengths, because then I realized, wow, it's not just about my pressing strength. It's about my upper back strength, too. That's something that I didn't even bother to think about before. So it's a completely different sport. They're wildly different. So I agree with you can't compare them. But I also think you need to, if you want to dive into the equipment, you really need to realize that you need to train very differently. Yep. And the kind of stuff that matters raw doesn't matter so much in equipment. Yeah,
another thing I want to kind of tip my hat to Mel. I think she did a really good job of trusting the process. So I want to kind of go through her progression personally. I think it's something that a lot of people that are interested in gear, I think they try to jump into the real tight stuff and the real advanced stuff too soon. So what Mel did personally, she did a bench-only meet. She did a deadlift-only meet in just briefs. She worked on the single lifts, and a lot of people, I don't think, take advantage of single lifts. And I think in terms of multiply and equipped lifting, the single lift meets are a really good way just to practice one lift at a time, so you don't have to kind of get overwhelmed with learning all this new equipment all at once. And then after that, she just did a meet in just briefs and a bench shirt as well. And then after that, then she's transitioned to adding a squat suit and adding a deadlift suit and so forth. And we've slowly added more tighter and more aggressive equipment over time, and she's progressed as a result. So that's kind of a good way to go about it, because I think a lot of people get frustrated. They use too tight a bench shirt. They use too advanced of a squat suit too soon, too tight a knee wrap. There's definitely a marathon, not a sprint. It takes a long time to learn the skill. Obviously, if someone is kind of a genetic freak and they're just strong raw off the bat, they can kind of excel in the ranks. I think equipped lifting, it's very, very rare that you see somebody that just kind of jump into it and kind of dominate. It's going to take some time to learn. And obviously, you do need that strong raw base, but some of the muscle groups, like your triceps, your lat strength, your upper back strength, are going to be more of a factor. Certainly when you're in the equipment, and your core strength is going to be paramount. If your upper back and your core is not able to stand up with the weight, you're not going to be able to squat it no matter how much help you're getting. And at the end of the day, it's still whatever weight. If it's 500 pounds, 900 pounds, 1,000 pounds in your back, it's still compressive forces on your spine that you need to deal with. Or if you have 300, 400, 500, 600 pounds in your hands, it's still forces your joints need to deal with. And you see that a lot of times, especially with women. You see kind of, I think one of the girls at the Arnold actually, I think, broke her clavicle because she wasn't ready. It didn't seem like her body was prepared for the weight that she was handling in the bench shirt. So it's something to consider. You want to be careful. You want to let your tissues adapt and slowly progress over time. Okay. All right, so another thing I wanted to kind of touch on was your weight loss journey. You've kind of followed suit with what I've been doing, which has been really cool to see. You've totaled 1,000 pounds in over 3 different weight classes, 181, 165s, and most recently 1,100 at 148, which is ties your all-time best. And also you hit an all-time bench PR, two weight classes down, which is really impressive. So maybe if you can just kind of talk about what that journey's been like, and then maybe any kind of challenges and some tips for people that are maybe looking to lose weight and still be strong.
Yeah, I think it was kind of, the biggest thing was mental and kind of seeing, definitely, because I think if you don't take the weight into account, right, let's say you look from last year's Arnold to this year's Arnold, it's like, wow, your total stayed the same. And I think a lot of people don't realize, well, yeah, that's what happens when you lose weight. Just maintaining your strength is an insane thing to do. Most people's strength goes down if they don't do it right, so just maintaining is insane. So I think part of it is looking at it through that lens where there's nothing wrong with doing your very best to maintain what you've built as you recomposition your body. I think in the beginning I was definitely, I had unreasonable expectations of thinking, you can put on insane amounts of weight on your total as you're dropping weight to that extent. And to go from 185 to, walking around at 155 and then competing in the 148s, I think I've done a pretty good job of. Even my first equipped meet was 1,000 pounds, and I think I was still in the 181s, I think, at that point.
Yep.
So, that's 100 pounds on top of that. But everyone wants everything right now. They want the pounds on their total and the pounds off the scale to happen at the exact same time. And you have to realize that's not going to happen. And also, okay, cool. So I had 100 pounds to my total tomorrow, and I'm shredded tomorrow. Okay, and what's the next goal? It's not like you're going to stop working out. You're going to stop powerlifting. If you're in this for the long haul, it kind of made me realize, well, what's the rush? Why are you putting a deadline on? I mean, yes, you should have a deadline on your goals, but not arbitrarily set that's, to the point of stress-inducing. This shouldn't be stressful. It should be fun. So if you're creating expectations that make it stressful, you kind of have to reevaluate a little bit.
Cool. Yeah, I think I could jump in as well talking about this. And when you're dropping weight classes, I think it's important to kind of just establish new PRs. And so if you've never competed in a certain class before, it's a PR in that weight class. The other thing I like to look at is your Wilks score. And some of the open powerlifting, they're kind of advocating this new DOTS formula, and there's different things. There's, Glossbrenner has been used for the multiply lifting. So whatever kind of formula you use, I think Wilks is still the most popular. It's good to that's a good way to kind of gauge, are you getting stronger relative to your body? So there's a lot of other ways that you can look at things, and I think play the long game. Don't be in such a rush. Mel, it's been great to have you on the show today. If where can people find you if they want to follow your training and what you're doing?
I'm on Instagram. It's pretty much the only thing I'm on. I'm not good with social media. So I'm on there, Exploding Llama 342. If you come to a profile that's full of lifting and a bulldog, that's me.
So lifting and dogs, deadlifts and dogs, it's always good stuff. So give Mel a follow, show her support in her weight loss and strength journey. If this interview helped you, please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Check out the links in the description if you want to support the program. And until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.